Well, thank you again for being here today. My name is Amber Wallin, and I'm the Deputy Director at New Mexico Voices for Children. And I think, as Melanie addressed earlier, child well-being has been weighing very heavily on many of our minds recently. And it's been rightfully at the centerpiece of a lot of our national conversations. And in order to give you a bit better of an idea of how we think of child well-being at New Mexico Voices for Children, and why we have been so troubled by the recent events on our border, I first want to give you a little bit more background on our Kids Count program that Leslie introduced earlier. So Kids Count is a state-by-state and national effort that was started and continues to be supported and led by the Annie E. Casey Foundation. And it tracks the status and well-being of children and families in four primary, what we call domains of well-being: economic well-being, education, health, and family and community. It's all based on research and on government-collected data, and it calls attention to the issues and to the policies that are impacting children across the states, across the nation, and in New Mexico. But really, at its heart, Kids Count tells a story. It tells a story about child well-being, and it tells a story about the opportunities that are available for our kids and for our families. And before we get into what that story says about child well-being in New Mexico and about the opportunities that are available for our kids and for our families, I want you all to take just a few moments and think about your story. So think about what guides you. Think about what inspires you, what gets you riled up. Think about what drives you. And think about how that story led you here today, to a conference that is focused wholly on improving child well-being in our state. So to give you a little background on my story and about why I'm here today, this is a picture of the ranch where my mom grew up, and her dad before her, and so on and so forth. It's located about 90 miles or so north of here, which I think is that direction in this room, outside of Cuba, New Mexico, in the mountains there. And like my mom, who's here today, actually, and many generations of family members before, I was born and raised in New Mexico. And like 28% of New Mexico's kids, I was raised by a single mother. My mom was a public school teacher. And for most of the time that I was growing up, she not only worked full-time teaching middle school math and special ed, but she also often held down part-time jobs to help her support me and my two siblings. So despite the fact that she'd worked really hard to put herself through college, secured a good, stable, full-time job where she contributed every day to making New Mexico a better place, she didn't always make enough to do it on her own. And so, like 68% of New Mexico's kids, my siblings and I qualified for the National Free and Reduced Price Lunch Program. And one day, one year, my mom's superintendent pulled her aside because he said that he had an issue that he needed her to take care of. He said that he didn't want her to let us take those free lunches anymore because he said it looked bad. It looked bad that they weren't paying their teachers enough to feed their kids. He said it was a problem. And he's right? He was right. It was a problem. It is a problem. Because it's a problem when hard-working families with good full-time jobs don't make enough to support their kids. And it's a problem when we do not always pay teachers enough in our state to feed their families. And it's a problem when the blame and the repercussions for bad policy is shifted onto the backs of the kids and the families that are impacted by those policies. families struggling to get by, women and kids blamed for bad policy, when these are not unique occurrences in our state. So that's just part of my story, part of why I'm here today. These are another couple of parts of my story. This is Augustus, he's 4, and Luciana, she's 1. And these are some more reasons why I'm here. These kids advocating for better public policy on the floor of the Roundhouse, these are reasons why we're all here. Because research shows that the events that kids experience during childhood, that they can carry those with them for the rest of their lives. So children's chances of being healthy, of doing well in school, and of growing up to be productive and contributing members of society, these are all tied to those early years. And so that's why at Voices for Children, we are driven by the belief, and I know you're all here today because you agree, that all children, regardless of where they live, of how much money their families make, or of the color of their skin, deserve the best possible opportunity, the best possible shot at reaching their full potential. But the reality is, in New Mexico, we are not doing a very good job at ensuring adequate opportunities for all of our kids to thrive and to succeed. And too many are struggling as a result. So as of today, we're ranked 49th in the nation in overall child well-being. In only one other state are conditions worse for kids. And just as troubling is the fact that we're ranked poorly in each of those domains that I mentioned. So we're 48th in economic well-being. A couple of years ago, we fell to 50th, education. We're 37th in health. And we're ranked 49th in the indicators of the Family and Community Index. We have the worst child poverty rate in the nation. And tens of thousands more New Mexico kids live in poverty now than did prior to the Great Recession. We have the second highest rate of childhood food insecurity. We have high child abuse rates and low reading and math scores. And we rank poorly in terms of access to high quality early childhood education and care opportunities. And not only are indicators troubling across many domains, but disparities exist in nearly every indicator that we track. With children of color more likely to live in poverty and in high poverty areas, less likely to have health insurance, less likely to have access to and to be able to afford high quality early care, much less likely to have access to linguistically and culturally appropriate and sensitive learning materials, and more likely to be hungry. So unfortunately in New Mexico, children of color often face higher hurdles to success and can face serious challenges at sometimes much greater rates than do many of their peers. And this is especially problematic, especially troubling in New Mexico, because such a large portion of our childhood population is comprised of children of color. So while it's predicted that nationally, by the year 2030, the majority of the U.S. child population will be comprised of children of color, in New Mexico, of course, we're already way ahead of that trend. So 75% of our kids in New Mexico are children of color. And so while this portion of our childhood population is strong in number, and while our cultural diversity is one of those things that makes New Mexico such a unique and awesome and enchanting place to grow up and to live, there are many areas where we're facing challenges, and too many of our kids are facing these challenges. And this is an area where we cannot make progress for all of our kids without a deliberate focus on improving resources for those that are too often being left behind. But instead of improving resources, we have been actively moving in the opposite direction by enacting a deeply flawed and failed tax cut strategy that has starved essential programs of much needed revenue. We've cut taxes more than 37 times in the past 7 years alone, to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. And while the benefits of these tax cuts went overwhelmingly to the most well-connected, and especially to the biggest corporations, the real results felt by most New Mexico families, has been that we haven't had the money to fund really essential programs. So we've cut K-12 per pupil spending by more than 10% when you factor in inflation since 2008. We've cut higher ed spending by more than 30%. We're underfunding our healthcare system, and we've slashed the budgets for our school-based health centers. Now at Voices, we often feel like this. Because over the years, for too many years, we've gotten used to being at the forefront of communicating a lot of these negative statistics around child well-being in our state. And we know that people don't like to hear the bad news. We know that it can make people feel guilty and angry, powerless, and worst of all, complacent. And as the frequent bearers of that bad news, we get it. We know people are tired of hearing it. We are tired of saying it. But we have to keep reporting it. Because the truth is, we need to do better at creating opportunities for New Mexico's kids. But there's good news too. And the good news is that not only are our kids and our communities incredibly strong and resilient, but also that we know what works. We know what works to improve childhood outcomes. So simply put, policies matter. Research shows that positive experiences, conditions, and public policies can all have powerful and sustained benefits for kids that last from birth on through adulthood. And so positive and comprehensive support systems during childhood are associated with things like better health outcomes, lower rates of childhood food insecurity, better test scores, higher graduation rates, and cost savings in remedial education. Again and again, we see that making kids a priority in our budgets matters, that home visiting matters, that pre-K matters, that child care assistance and dropout prevention programs matter, and that adequately staffing and paying our teachers, and our guidance counselors, and our protective service caseworkers matters. So again and again, we see investing in New Mexico's kids and in New Mexico's families will pay dividends multiple times over for our communities and for our state. And we've seen this firsthand in recent years. We've seen how policy investments can lead to very real improvements for New Mexico's kids. So thanks to the expansion of the Affordable Care Act in New Mexico, more than 30,000 more New Mexico kids got health insurance. Thanks to the hard work of advocates, many of whom are in this room, to hard work on the part of legislative staff, to commitment on the part of legislators, more than 4,000 more New Mexico kids were able to attend New Mexico pre-K last year than could in 2010, and 4,000 more New Mexico families were able to access state-funded home visiting programs. So, while there is still, obviously, a long way left yet to go, there are many areas where we are making progress, and these areas show that we have the power to make positive change for our kids, and that we can do it through policy. It's not always quick, or simple, or easy, but we can do it. And so imagine this. Imagine if, instead of so frequently ranking poorly as compared to other states, when it comes to measures of child well-being, imagine if we wanted to fully commit to being better. What would it take? Well, in order to be better than average on the number of young children not enrolled in school, we would just need to see 680 more 4-year-olds enrolled in high-quality preschool. In order to be better than average on the number of teens not in school and not working, we would just need to see 2% fewer teen dropouts. And in order to be better than average on the number of babies born at an unhealthy, a low birth weight, we would just need to have 170 more babies per year born at a healthy weight. We can do these things. Sí se puede. Because for far too long, there has been too much of a focus on asking what we can do for the wealthiest, the most well-connected, the biggest corporations. But we need to be asking what we can do for New Mexico's kids and for New Mexico's families. And this year is the perfect time to be having that conversation. Because we are at a crossroads as a state. We have had trials in our past, and we will have challenges in our future. But the elections of 2018 are a chance for all of us to take an active role in beginning to rewrite the story of child well-being in our state. A chance to ensure that kids are made a priority in our budgets and in our policy decisions. A chance to ask those candidates what they will do to improve opportunities for our kids. And a chance to elect and to hold accountable policymakers for passing evidence-based policies that will help our kids succeed. And as I'm wrapping up here today, I want to consider something that Robert F. Kennedy said just over 50 years ago, just prior to his death. He said that the greatest truth must be the recognition that in every child is the potential for greatness. It is up to us, not just as parents, as aunts, uncles, grandparents, family members and friends, but also as community members, as New Mexicans, to ensure that we stoke the fires of that potential for all of New Mexico's kids, for all of those kids. We are all in this together. And investing in New Mexico's kids will make our communities and our economy and our state stronger. It's not just the right and the moral thing to do. It's also the smartest possible investment that we can make in our state's future success. And with that, I want to tell you all again, thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up for New Mexico's kids. Thank you for being part of the solution.